Hello. Today's topic is psychological hunger. A very interesting topic that ties in both of our experiences, but I think that it's going to be a little bit different with each of our perspectives, similar to what we talked about last week. So, have you heard about psychological hunger before?
Very little, but I have heard a little bit about it, and it's a very interesting concept.
It is. It is. Psychological hunger is something that we all experience. I love the idea of, I don't love it, I shouldn't say that. I do not love the idea. I hate the experience because we all know what it feels like. It is this looking in the refrigerator, looking in the cupboards for this food. You eat something, you're like, yeah, that didn't do it. I go to eat something else. All of a sudden you've eaten all of this food and you're still left empty.
Yep.
It didn't satisfy it.
Yep.
Have you had that experience before?
Oh, multiple times. So now looking for the one thing, and you just don't know what it is. You're just hungry.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think that none of us are immune to it. We all have had that experience. It doesn't mean only people that weigh this have experienced it. It's something that we all experience. So it's a very interesting topic that I think will help us understand weight loss and our perspective on weight loss.
It gives you kind of the idea that you're not alone with that, obviously, and
Yes.
and second, that it's not just the something that only happens with that one person, and it's not something that can't be corrected.
Right.
So it's definitely doable.
Yes. Yes. So you don't need to rummage around looking for a food that's not going to satisfy the hunger.
Every single time.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm curious about, Kyle, is I understand my perspective of psychological hunger and what I've experienced with my veterans in clinic. I'm interested to know, with your degree, did the neuropsychology, did you touch on that subject at all?
We did a little bit. We talked about how when it comes to the way we think about things, it forms and shapes, and a lot of it becomes more of a habitual habit. Kind of the way that they explained it to us is that you're doing it, as you said, out of the psychological need or the idea of it, not necessarily the actual hunger or anything that you actually need for sustenance, and it becomes a kind of ritual when you're trying to figure out if you want to eat something or not.
Interesting. That is an interesting perspective. I like like it's a habit that we form. In clinic, a lot of times what I would do is I would tell people to print out. I would give them a printout that would say here are the signs of psychological hunger and here are the signs of physical hunger, and have them place it on the refrigerator. And stop when you go into that refrigerator or the cupboard, whatever your go-to is. Some refrigerator, some maybe freezer, whatever it is. Stop and pause and say, am I actually physically hungry? And how would you know?
I mean, your tummy talks to you sometimes.
That's a way, yes. So physical hunger. So it starts out with knowing, what is my physical hunger?
What are the signs?
Yes. Everybody has different signs of physical hunger. So we typically relate it to the growling stomach, but that's not the only sign of physical hunger.
No.
Yeah, so we talked about our experiences being different. Hunger is one of them as well. Some people experience physical hunger, by starting to think about food. So you start to disrupt your day and you start having ideas of maybe a commercial that you saw or your favorite food that you enjoy. That can be a sign that your brain is telling you that you're hungry. You need to refuel. Some people actually, I think this one is really interesting, start to feel like a tightness in their throat. Like almost like it's getting real tight in here. That's a sign of physical hunger. Being choked.
I'm kidding. No, that doesn't sound like a very good way to know that I'm hungry.
Right. But I always go back to that 2:00 in the afternoon wall that we have all experienced. And that wall, that inability to think, and you get tired, you may start yawning, is actually a sign that you're physically hungry.
Oh, I thought it was just that we need adult naps.
We might need that too. So, but I think that's the first place to start. If you don't know how you feel hunger, how are you going to identify whether you're psychologically hungry or physically hungry?
Makes sense.
And we are terrible. We are terrible as humans, right? We ignore hunger. We eat through fullness. We disrupt our body's ability to actually physically feel hunger. Right? So we can go all day without eating. Like, Dana, I'm not hungry. I'm not hungry all day. Oh, your brain needed some fuel. Your body needed some fuel. We just disrupted this. We are innately born with the ability to feel hunger. You think about those babies. You may not have had the experience.
Nope, they're just loud.
They're just loud. But if you've ever seen a baby that you try to overfeed, you're like, just finish this amount of food.
One more bite.
Their mouths clamp down hard, or they spit it out at you. We see commercials that have this. They know when I'm done, I'm done. And when they're hungry, they are going to scream until they get fed. They're not ignoring that hunger.
So the psychological something that we've learned over time because
Yes.
we just keep eating.
Mm-hmm. And we've also learned to be able to ignore and shut off that physical hunger. So before we even get to identify psychological hunger, we need to be able to identify
The actual physical hunger when you are hungry, when you're not.
We all have it. It does wake up, which that could be a subject at another day. But notice that if you're unsure and you're asking yourself if I'm physically hungry or psychologically hungry, I may need to wake up that faulty or sleepy hunger hormone first.
That makes sense. Well, it's one of those things that, advertising at this point has even been designed against us in the psychological versus, physical hunger. I mean, red and yellow, everybody knows what that, company that is. And man, all of it is just about aiming at specific things and, like you said, interrupting our whole entire.
So what does that do? What does that do to your brain?
Oh, it makes you really hungry. And the more you think about the colors, the more you think about specific places and whatever you like there, and you end up either buying different things, or you start rummaging through things in your cabinet, and then you're trying to find something to satisfy the hunger of something you don't have there. And
it's reminding me of a story you told me the other day of the was it Pavlov's?
Pavlov.
What is it, right?
Pavlov.
Okay.
Or Pavlov's dog, where every time he rang the bell, the dogs would salivate and he would feed them. And it's classical conditioning. It's a psychology concept that once you have a repetitive action enough times, that it'll condition you to have this specific response. The question is, did he Pavlov himself, that every time you hear a bell, did he, think, okay, I got to feed the dogs? And it kind of comes down with the food as it becomes so repetitive, it kind of reverses and does the same exact thing to you instead of just one way, like we all, originally thought with that concept.
So he trained himself along with the dog.
Yep.
But also the red and yellow trained us.
Yep. Taught us that when we see those things, we think of specific, foods or places and stuff like that, and kind of classically conditioned us. Yeah.
So to add a layer to that, there are some studies that show that somebody, once they hit a level of, there's no specific weight level, but there are actual physiological changes that happen in our body. And one of the studies showed a picture of food to fed. So people that were fed, one of normal weight and one that was in the obesity range. And they did brain scans when they were shown this food. Normal weight, no brain centers, no reward centers lit up. They were not hungry, right? They were already fed and satisfied. But interestingly, the ones that were in the obesity range, and I don't know exactly which range it was at, their brain centers, their reward centers just lit right up by the visual of that food, and that was even in a fed state. So it goes to another level.
Releasing endorphins and
Yeah.
That's never good.
as we tell ourselves that we need to just do better, and your brain is working against you on that. So very interesting with that, how those concepts kind of come together. When we look at the psychology of when we look at, not the psychology, when we look at psychological hunger, some of the different signs of psychological hunger are nothing. a salad won't do. You're not going to be satisfied with chicken and broccoli, right? Even if you say, well, I'm not really satisfied with that anyways. Well, you are, right?
Overall, yes.
Yeah, it will shut off hunger.
Yeah.
It'll
yeah.
shut down
For
your
the
hunger
basic
hormones.
needs.
Yep. But it won't shut off that psychological
Yep.
hunger. You're going to continue to look for what types of foods. I should.
I ate good. I had broccoli and chicken. I can now have that cheesecake.
The trifecta.
Yep.
This is what we call that. Sugar, salt, and fat.
Yep.
That is what puts those reward centers in our brain in overdrive.
Yep.
Yep. Those are. But the interesting thing is that that's what we go to for psychological hunger. But is it satisfying?
It is at the time, and that's the problem. Is it's the very quick, very short reward.
Fleeting.
So yeah.
Yes.
So we think it's satisfying, and then you realize it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's like buying something and then realizing the next day it was on sale. It was great at the time, but now it's too expensive.
That's a good one. All right. So that psychological hunger is typically, aside from the brain scans, comes from something else. Right. So what else did we need besides food? So we're trying to replace a need that we have, which could be a whole array of different things.
Could be everything from attention to, feeling bad about yourself or anything, like that.
Yep. The need for laughter, connection.
I don't do that enough. I don't laugh.
We never know.
Never
It's
laugh.
never enough.
Never smile.
It's not sarcastic at all.
No.
But those release what?
Endorphins.
Right.
And that's what you're trying to go after. You're trying to go after the happy drug in the human body.
Yep. So that psychological hunger is, what do I need instead of food?
Mm-hmm.
What am I trying to replace in my life with food that typically doesn't work?
Yep.
So when we put that piece of paper on the refrigerator and we stop and say, identifying, am I psychologically hungry or physically hungry? If I'm physically hungry, eat.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're trying to lose weight, eat. Your body's telling you something that you need to eat. But if it's psychological hunger, in my perspective, what we would do is say, what do I need instead of food? I don't know, if you've ran across anything else that would be helpful in that arena.
A lot of it is just creating habits or hobbies instead of having just the standard, okay, I'm, hungry, thinking I'm hungry and I should eat. It's,
Keeping yourself busy.
Yeah. Am I sitting here doing nothing? Am I keeping myself busy? Am I exercising? Am I, whatever, something to replace that. And another thing, healthy thing is drinking water and more fluids. A lot of times when you drink enough water, you won't be hungry anymore.
Yeah, but that's a that's a physical.
True.
Yeah.
But it can also, at least I would assume that it would help with the psychological, where you're actually ingesting something and water's not bad for you.
No, water's good. Yes. Most people don't drink enough and are chronically dehydrated. And water makes your skin look nice. I always say water makes you look younger. We don't want to look like a dehydrated prune. At least I don't.
Yeah. No, that definitely wouldn't be good.
So with the psychological hunger and the different things, what's very interesting is the World Health Organization recently added with the determinants, the social determinants of health, isolation. So through a COVID experience of everybody being isolated and away from people and having that limited social interactions, overeating and weight gain skyrocketed. So that is definitely something that drove psychological hunger.
That makes sense.
Needing that social interaction.
Yep, not having people there.
We need that connection with people. But interesting that I think that a lot of veterans can experience is that need for purpose.
Yeah.
Especially after being medically retired.
Getting medically retired and not having a choice.
Yeah.
And you go from having a standard set of this is X, Y, Z, and this is what's going to happen, and going to not having any of that, no structure anymore. So you got to create it. So yeah.
But that's a challenge. That's a challenge to create that structure. Do you have any recommendations to help?
You have to find your niche, your thing that you enjoy, and you go that way and you build off. Each thing's just a baby step. So it's not about having some grand plan from the very beginning. It's finding this piece that works, that is working for what you need, and then moving to the next piece and slowly expanding it to being a whole concept.
So one of my favorite analogies is you can't eat the entire elephant. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
One bite at a time.
So that's the same with any of that change, taking that one little piece and deciding which direction you're going to go, and you don't know where the end is going to be.
Yeah.
You just start. That's great for psychological hunger, and being able to identify what is it that I need instead of food, and what would be that next step. Which next week we'll talk about some of those options and dive a little bit more into it, but.